Dans la description que tu viens de faire des comportements essentiellement racistes et discriminatoires des policiers dans les communautés autochtones, et comme tu dis, la même chose peut être dite de l'attitude des policiers ici dans Parc Extension ou dans d'autres quartiers à Montréal-Nord. Beaucoup de gens qui, en entendant ce genre d'histoire-là, diraient « Oh, c'est anecdotique, c'est une expérience isolée, c'est juste que toi t'as vu, c'est quelques mauvaises pommes, ça représente pas le système dans son ensemble ». Mais si on regarde les racines et les origines de l'histoire de la force policière, que ce soit au Canada ou aux États-Unis, Gaby, tu en parles beaucoup dans ton livre, les origines de la police, l'histoire de la police, la création de la police, qui est d'ailleurs un phénomène assez récent, alors que beaucoup de gens pensent que ça existe depuis toujours dans les sociétés, c'est pas vrai. Je me demandais si tu pouvais parler un petit peu de la connexion justement entre l'origine de la police et le genre de comportement et de phénomènes dont Will parlait.
Yeah, I do think it's important to talk about the history of policing because there's often an assumption that they've always existed, you know, that it's an absolute, that we've always lived in societies where there's a professional police force going around deeming right from wrong and deciding how people should conduct themselves. And it's a relatively new phenomenon if you look at the history of mankind, you know, like I'm going to talk a little bit about three. I'll talk about England, the US, and Canada, just to give an idea of how it did begin and how from the outset it was derived to control certain segments of the population that were deemed problematic in terms of capitalist interests. And we have to realize that if it started that way, why are we to assume that now they're there for, you know, keeping the peace neutrally, you know? So basically in England, the first modern, what we call professional police force, because there were militias that would go around doing stuff, but it was in 1820. And basically it was to increase the control over the working classes and to maintain the ruling class interests, because this was the time of expansion, of industrialization, urbanization. Everybody was going to the cities. And it caused like extreme class divisions between individuals that didn't really exist before, between the workers and the industrialists. And there was a lot of rebellion, obviously, against this capitalist order because there were horrible, unhealthy working conditions, dangerous conditions. And people who started rebelling against all this were defined as criminals in the dangerous classes. So they came up with a professional police force that basically was designed around the idea of trying to quash these rebellions and to keep the workers in line so that they could be more productive and so that they accept their situation and would basically enforce the economic and political elites. In the US, the same thing. The first professional police force, because prior to that there were a lot of non-professional, like the Southern slave patrols that would go around and make sure that the slaves were obeying their masters and stuff like that. But I think it was in 1850 something that the US had their first professional police force, and it was in New York. And it was the same kind of like England. It was a response to industrialization, urbanization, people rebelling against their work conditions. There was a lot of the skilled laborers couldn't get jobs. It was unskilled labor because it was factories. So there was a lot of machine breaking and stuff like that. And once again, the police force was created to deal with these kind of resistances. In Canada, although it's not the first professional police force, I think it's important to talk about the RCMP because we all see it like, you know, what do you see? The Mountie riding the horse, you know, it's like the symbol of Canada, you know, oh, look at the Mounties, you know. They have a pretty good reputation, generally. And same like US and England, they came about, it's very loud, should I talk a little bit? No. Okay, sorry, I have a very loud voice. No, okay. Yeah, they were first called the Northwest Mountain Police when they first started, and they came in 1873. And basically it was similar motivations, but this time it was what's not loud enough, okay. It was the time of Confederation, and there was a lot going on with land stealing, okay? The Hudson Bay Company and the government of Great Britain were trying to take resourceful land away from the Métis. And they were getting a lot of resistance and rebellion. So that's where the Northwest Mounted Police came about. And basically they were used to seize the resourceful land from the Métis and hand it over to the government so that they could build transcontinental railways and expand capitalism. And, where was I? Sorry, I made a little bit of notes for this. And also they were there to civilize the barbaric Indians, you know, that were rebelling against their situation. And there was an actual rebellion in 1885 where a bunch of people were slaughtered. That's where Louis Riel was killed. He was executed with 8 other indigenous from the Métis clan. And I just think it's important to remember that these are the roots, because if we bring it back to today, we make those links that's what it's formed on. So it's never going to be about everybody equal and fair and equal treatment for all, which a lot of people assume, maybe not in this room, but in the population in general. I think a lot of people have confidence in the police, and they assume that they've always been there, and they assume that we can't live in a society without them because there'd be mayhem and anarchy, you know? And which is not the case. I do think people can mediate situations in other ways. And at least if you can't get rid of the police, you could definitely change the proactive nature of the police, because I do think that when you look for crime, you're going to find more crime, and that's what I think the initiative has become since this community policing, which I won't get too much into now. But it's just to remember that they haven't always been there, and they don't always need to be around. There are other possibilities, which I guess we'll discuss on Sunday.